First of all, thank you very much for making you available for this interview. Can you tell us about your spiritual journey and how you got into Tiruvannamalai to Bhagavan Ramana and Arunachala?
I first came to Bhagavan many years ago, probably 1980. So there, just briefly, I met a man in California who had just returned from Ramana ashram, and I liked him very much. And he was just beginning to do satsang around the California area, talking about Bhagavan, talking about his time at Ramana ashram. Now he's quite a well-known teacher in America, and very highly regarded, both in India and in America now. But there wasn't much information available about Bhagavan, but he gave me a bookmark, something that you keep track of the pages on a book for when you're reading it. And it had Bhagavan's picture on it. I was very attracted to this picture, but there just wasn't any information available other than talking to this man about Bhagavan's teaching. None of the books had been published in the U.S., and I was very hungry to understand something about myself, and so I took up practice at a Buddhist monastery. And then over the course of about 15 years, I slowly was able to find out a little bit more about Bhagavan and his teaching. But having a very complicated mind, I was not really able to understand the simplicity of his teaching, and I had a very difficult time practicing it, just doing the inquiry. So Buddhism was suiting this complicated mind more at this time. There was lots of books to read, lots to do. So I continued in that way. Continued to practice in this way, and eventually ended up becoming a Dharma teacher in the Buddhist tradition. And this went on all total for about 16 or 17 years that I was practicing and teaching, and all this time keeping this small picture of Bhagavan on the altar. And whenever I would go to lead a retreat or something, taking this picture along and setting it on the altar. But not really talking about that, but slowly gaining some more interest in trying to find books and people to talk to and things like this about Bhagavan's teaching. So,
In which Buddhist tradition was
this was
that?
in Theravadan tradition and Vipassana tradition. So in a way, I wasn't able to see that there was a separation between the Buddhist tradition and Bhagavan's teaching. I couldn't see that there was any difference in these two. Years later, I found out that when someone, I think Osborne or someone, asked Bhagavan what if there was a teaching similar to his that was widespread in the world, Bhagavan said Zen Buddhism. So he understood in his own teaching, in his own work as guru to the world, that there was this similarity in the terms of the emptiness and the interconnectedness of all experiences as the self.
And may I ask you how you can reconcile the Atman of Bhagavan and the Anatta of the Buddha?
Probably the simplest way is to realize that Anatta and Atman are one. They are the same. There is, the Heart Sutra in Zen Buddhism says emptiness is form and form is emptiness. So this is the way in which the two can be reconciled. Everything is God, or nothing is God. Bhagavan said this. Many others, Advaita teachers, have said this as well. So this speaks very clearly to me of the connection between I am nothing and I am everything. God is nothing and God is everything. So emptiness is the anatta form, correct? But this emptiness is a fullness. It's not a blankness. Yeah? It is a fullness. And so this is how these two can be reconciled, I think.
Can you tell us how you finally reached Arunachala?
So there was a point where this there didn't seem to be a reconciliation possible between the experience that was manifesting as a consequence of inquiry at the same time that I was also teaching in the Vipassana world, which as a teacher in the Vipassana world is a very strict formula that you follow. And this is not always compatible with the recognition or realization that everything is God. First of all, being the fact that in the Buddhist tradition, God is not existent and is not talked about. Only Buddha nature. So at one point I said to the community that I was working in and working with and teaching, some of the things that I was discovering through the inquiry that were becoming, some things I was realizing about the nature of consciousness and the nature of experience, how they relate to one another. And I was beginning to teach these in the Buddhist retreats that I was doing, but without making a distinction. But then it became difficult to continue in that way, because in the Buddhist tradition, it's one of the biggest ways of moving forward is to say, where do you see that in the scripture? So when you start to talk about your own experience, you can face this kind of challenge. So I just decided to honor the tradition of the Buddha and to honor the experience of the inquiry. I needed to stop. So I did. I did one final 6-week-long retreat with my community, and then I said, that's it, I'm finished. And I came to New Mexico, and I was living at Neem Karoli Baba Ashram, working as a gardener. And there was I think it was Neem Karoli Baba Jayanti was coming up. And so this brought many, many people from all over the United States. And one person who came was a woman who came in her van. I was there living in my van, my camper, and we were parked fairly close together. So we were seeing each other every day, but we weren't talking. After Jayanti, as everyone got ready to leave, she came to me and she said, I don't know what I'm supposed to talk with you about, but I know I'm supposed to talk with you. Can we just spend an hour, half an hour? Before I leave, I have to go. Okay. So she wanted to know something about it, some kind of conversation like we're having here. I told her my story, just the things I've told you, and she said, oh, now I know why I'm supposed to talk to you. She said, I live in Tiruvannamalai, about a block and a half or 3 blocks, something from Ramana Ashram. And so Bhagavan's message to you is the time is now. You must come. And she said, I'm leaving next week. I'm going back to Tiruvannamalai. I will go to the ashram, make all the arrangements, and when everything is ready and you are ready, then you come. and everything will be waiting for you when you come. So I said, okay, good. So that's what happened. That's how I ended up in Tiruvannamalai. I didn't know anything about Bhagavan's relationship with Arunachala. A little bit, I had seen pictures and so on, but I didn't really get too much into that. I was just drawn to his teaching of inquiry, so I was happy to be coming to the ashram. So I had been afraid to come to India. I was not healthy at that time, so I'd been somewhat afraid to come to India because of the conditions for health and environment there and so on. So I was a little bit reluctant, but when I heard this message, it was so clear and she was so certain. I just knew in my own heart that this was Bhagavan's call. So about 6 weeks later, I was there. Yeah.
And you spent many years in Tiruvannamalai, is it right?
Well, not initially. Initially, I came. I was just there 7 or 8 weeks. But by the time I was there, the first 2 weeks I was there, as I said, I was not particularly healthy. I didn't have a strong immune system. So for the first 2 weeks I was there, I was just going to the ashram every day, but I was very sick. Sick in every way, The whole system was just going through this, getting used to India. But after about 2 weeks, even with all of this going on, after about 2 weeks, I realized, for the very first time in my life, at that time I was about 55, very first time in my life, I feel as though I am home. I'd lived in many, many places and traveled to Brazil and lived there for a year and moved around with my children and lived in different places throughout my life. Been to Asia, but never to India, things like that. And the first time I feel like, I'm finally home. So this was a very strong feeling. So I stayed for 7 or 8 weeks at that time. And I had a return ticket and I thought, this is very good. Feels very nice, and now I will go home. So I came back to New Mexico, went back to Neem Karoli Baba Ashram. But I was only able to stay. Then I left there and went to another ashram in California to serve with Baba Haridas, to be there with him and to spend time at that Hanuman temple. The Neem Karoli Baba Ashram in Taos is a Hanuman temple, and also is the one at Mount Madonna Center in California. So I just went there, and I was living there, and then I said, I must go back. So I lasted about 2 or 3 months at Mount Madonna Center, and then I got on a plane and came back to Tiruvannamalai with the intention of just staying for 6 months or so. But at that time, in Tiruvannamalai, you could go to the collectorate, and if you signed up in the first 2 weeks you were there, they would give you an indefinite visa. So you could stay as long as you wanted. So I had the intention only to stay for 6 months or a year, but I ended up that time staying completely for 4 years. And then the government changed the policy, and I had to go out to America and then come back. So then that's when we started this thing that happens in the past, in, out, in, out, in, out. But all total, yes, about 6.5 years in Tiruvannamalai, with some excursions to go out and get new visas and things like that.
And who is the teacher or master who made the biggest impression on you?
The biggest impression on me?
Yes. You're visiting many.
Yes, but still, the biggest one for me was Bhagavan. When I first went there, the very first time I went there, I walked into, before I even checked in, it used to be, Dr. Murthy, when you came in and you had your bag, he would say, put your bag over there and go for darshan, then you come back. You couldn't check into the ashram until you went for darshan. This was the way at that time. This was 2007. So I went for darshan. I went in. Now understand, I'm coming out of the Buddhist tradition, so I'm very I'm very like this, but I'm very, there's no devotional nature being expressed at all. Very Buddhism is very heart oriented, but also very mind oriented, and so this was my tradition. So even to be in India with all of this temples and pujas and things like this, it was not so appealing to me. So I wasn't expecting what happened. I walked slowly up to the front of the samadhi, and I started to bow, as was my way, like to the Buddha, and I just fell on the floor. And I was just there on the floor, with my head on the floor. And there was this such huge presence that was there in the samadhi. And I spent some time on the floor. And this started my journey more into the more devotional aspects of Vedanta. But this took quite a long time. This part really did not flower for me until I came back the second time. Because I was so much into resistance, my mind was playing this game about emptiness and you don't need to bow to anybody, blah, 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 This whole Buddhist position that I had taken, not the Buddhist position, just the Buddhist position that I thought it was the Buddhist position. So I had taken this position. And then my heart was breaking open. And this was a very challenging experience for me. But always since I've done that, always since I went back, every time I went back, when I walk into the samadhi, I walk around the samadhi, there is this great rush of energy that comes from being in Bhagavan's presence. So for me, though I had spent time with many other masters in California, several different monasteries from the time I was about in my early 20s, this was the first time I ever felt that direct connection with everyone else was a teacher. He was my master. And this was clear from the beginning.
A few years ago, you had a serious illness. Would you tell us a few words about what kind of illness it was and how long it lasted?
So, yeah, this was cancer. I had cancer of the throat. So this lasted for about, all total, it kept me away from India for about 3 years. 2 years of being directly involved with being treated for it and having surgeries and going through radiation and chemo and all of these kind of things. Yeah. This had a profound effect on deepening understanding, and the way that I have interpreted it, the profound understanding or the profound recognition came because this illness required me to completely stop. So even after coming to Bhagavan, there still was this tendency in some way to be searching. And even though I had understood very clearly from Bhagavan's teaching, from reading the books and so on, though I had understood intellectually that a primary aspect of the inquiry is to cultivate this ability to stop completely, to stop the mind, to stop the body, to see in the silence what is here. So I understood that this intellectually, that this was an important part of Bhagavan's teaching. And of course of his example. When he realized the self, he simply stopped. He came to Tiruvannamalai and he stopped and he never moved again. Excuse me. And for 4 years, he didn't speak. He barely moved. He would only move from one place to another when it became necessary for him to do that, from the temple to the mango grove, from the mango grove up the hill onto the hill, from Virupaksha cave up to Skanda ashram. So only when it became absolutely necessary that he moved. Otherwise he was just there, still, quiet, in the silence. So this was a profound knowing for me that this was a gateway or an access. But still I had this habitual nature that wanted to keep looking in some way or searching in some way. And even though I was fairly highly disciplined and I was able to sit for long periods of time, and I had been a meditator for many years, so in the Buddhist tradition, which is a very firm, not moving, stopping kind of position, this is only an external stopping. It's not the internal stopping that comes when the mind collapses or when there's no interest in the mind. So this is what the illness created for me, was this opportunity.
Do you regard your illness as a turning point in your life?
Yes. Yes. In some ways, everything before that moment was leading up to it. But in the final analysis, I had failed to surrender to stillness, failed to surrender completely to stopping. And even my journey to Tiruvannamalai was an expression of that not being able to stop completely. And I don't mean in just the perfunctory way, I mean completely. To completely lose interest in everything but the recognition I am aware, or I am the self. I don't know that without the illness, it's possible that I might have stopped some other way, but from this perspective, I cannot see any other way that would have stopped me so completely. I simply didn't possess the kind of will that, for instance, that Bhagavan possessed when at 16 years old. He said, "That's it, I am finished." And he went to Arunachala and he stopped and he sat for 4 years in silence, unmoving. So I'm not a person in this life that has possessed that kind of will. Still some distracted quality to the mind. But this illness caused all of that to be shattered. So I had to stop. And it gave me an extended period of time, over 2 years. For a year and a half, I simply was lying on the bed and or in the hospital or wherever, lying on the bed, and I had nothing to do but the inquiry. And the beautiful part about this illness part of it was that I knew also it was a different way, it was a prolonged experience, but in the same way that Bhagavan said, "Okay, I am dying." This is what he said. "Okay, this body is dying. So they will take this body to the charnel ground and they will burn it." So over a long period of time, I had this recognition, I am dying. So the question naturally arose in me, what will I do with this time? And I just became on fire because there was this recognition that if I didn't understand the nature of being for myself at that moment, that I could lose this body. And I had no way of knowing, would I gain another body in order to be able to realize the nature of being? and I was terrified. So this was a great motivator. Every day to stay with the inquiry. What is the nature of this? What does not die? I would ask myself this all the time. Knowing I was dying, the body was clearly dying, it was going away. I could ask myself every day, what does not die? So I think without these, the illness and the consequences of that as a motivator, I think I would have just remained the way that I was before, which was kind of having an intellectual understanding of Bhagavan's teaching, but without having the profound experience.
You said that during your illness you were stripped of everything except awareness. Were there periods when even awareness slipped away? Because you also told us that you were on machines and all that hospital environment.
Yes. So I think one of the most lasting recognitions that I had from all of this experience, and it has stayed till today, is that the most profound and deep understanding that awareness remains regardless of whether there is a awareness of the body or there is awareness of the mind. So, to answer your question more directly, yes, at times it's like going into deep sleep, right? During deep sleep, awareness of the body is gone. Awareness of the mind is gone. But as soon as awareness comes back into mind, there's this recognition, either I slept well or I didn't sleep well. So Bhagavan says this is the proof that this awareness, though there may not be awareness of the body, there may not be awareness of the mind, there is still a recognition that I was aware during this time. Therefore I can say I slept well as soon as the mind comes back again. So it was the same with the treatment. So there were these periods of time where necessarily I wasn't aware of what was going on. So I couldn't hear the machines beeping or someone coming in the room or going out. I wasn't aware of the body lying on the bed or so on. But as soon as there was awareness in the mind again, or as soon as there was physical sensation in the body, there's this recognition, oh, I'm aware of the body now. Where before there was no recognition, I am aware of the body. But there was also no recognition of I. So anyway, in that situation, there is no time. Awareness becomes seamless, and it doesn't make any difference whether there is the perception of awake, asleep, dreaming, pain, pleasure. These things don't matter. This has no impact on the awareness at all. And this was something that I saw very clearly during this time.
You were very near to death. Can we
Yes.
say that you had a near-death experience?
I never felt that way, because by then there was already this recognition, I am here. And here being this recognition, not the words, not the thought, the direct perception, I am here as it relates to awareness itself. That recognition, it doesn't matter to that recognition anything about what's happening with the body or the mind. It doesn't matter. The body can come or go. So there isn't a recognition of dying in that sense of being aware of dying, because there isn't at that point, not only is the fear of dying lost, the recognition I was never born is also there. So the recognition is that I am here, consciousness is here, awareness is here. This is that, you know. So it's like that. It's very simple and very direct. It's not necessarily for me, not a huge, it wasn't a very profound, you know, like some in this stories of many sages and so on. There's some profound experience and they talk about it with a big, you know, it was a big momentous experience. For me, it was a very quiet, simple understanding. Consciousness is here, it is here always. Nothing is born, nothing is died. Everything remains as it is. And what appears on the screen of this awareness or this consciousness is just changing all the time, but without any effect on consciousness itself, on being.
Can you tell us something about your recovery and how you started teaching after it?
Well, it was a long time after I started eating. Yeah. It was a long time before I started eating. So maybe close to 2 years I was without eating. So just being fed liquids through a tube. So that was a long, slow process, but I can't really say there was a moment that had anything to do with eating, but I have a very clear picture, a very clear memory of the moment when I realized I would not die. Not that I wasn't dying. I was still very thin. I had no muscle, just skin and bones. Hadn't eaten for 2 years. It was just laying in the bed. So, or, you know, in the hospital or whatever. But the second year I was just laying here in the bed. So, but there was a very clear recognition that I would not die. And from that moment, I could feel the life force come back into the body. It was as though it had left and dying was happening. So that was the main focus. And the question being, what does not die? And once that was seen or understood in some way directly, what does not die, then there was the opportunity and the body just said, oh, psh, and it started to come back again. And even with just liquids, the weight started to come back on. Mind started to brighten more. This was very clear that this was happening. And along with it came this very clear understanding that the reason that the body came back was because there was an understanding, direct perception. What was needed to be done has been done. What was needed to be seen has been seen. So now the body can die or not. It makes no difference. Not interested in it anymore. So in some way this caused everything to flower again. This understanding, this recognition.
And you started teaching again.
No, actually I didn't. I mean, I had been teaching before, and so I had known people, some people many, many years from when I was teaching Vipassana. So people were still coming to the house then once I was well enough to have people come around. Understand I couldn't speak for a long time. I had no voice, and I had surgery on my throat. So I was silent for a long time. So it was just yes and no on a whiteboard and some simple answers. But slowly people started hearing that I was doing better, and so people started coming over. Before that, they couldn't call or anything because I couldn't speak to them. But then they started coming over, and so just a little bit, but there wasn't really any more impulse to teach. You know, I'd been teaching in Vipassana tradition and in a little bit in Tiruvannamalai, just with one person, another person, someone would come up to me in the ashram, that kind of thing. So just having these conversations with people, but not doing group work, not doing retreats, nothing like that. But people started coming here, so then we said, okay, well, let's set a time. Few people, 3, 4 people coming. I was just starting to talk again. I couldn't talk for long. I didn't have very much voice, not very strong. But so I didn't really have a desire, but people were coming. But I had lost that desire to teach, to be a teacher. I didn't want to get involved in that. I felt like I had understood the purpose and the meaning of my life, the reason for taking birth, this life. And so I was happy with that, just content. Don't need anything. But a few people came, and it was good, and I was enjoying it. And then I thought one day, okay, I feel strong enough after about 3 years. I feel strong enough. I can go back to India now. And I went back to India just to live at Tiruvannamalai for some period of time. And the first time again, I was back for maybe 6 weeks or 8 weeks. I just wanted to live at the foot of Arunachala. I have a small apartment there that is on the property of a friend who was a longtime devotee of Nanagaru. And so Nanagaru was someone I spent a lot of time with when I lived in Tiru, sitting at his feet outside his room. And so when he moved to his ashram, the guest cottage that she had built for him was there, and she was sometimes renting it out to people during the season. And she heard that I was coming back there, and I had known her from that time and spent time with, she was Nanagaru's driver. And so I had spent time with him, and she had seen me with him. And I had many profound experiences with him. And she heard that I was coming, and she sent me a message. If you want to come and stay in Nana's guest house, you are welcome. So I said, yes, I will come, I will stay there. So I was just living in this compound very quietly, going to Ramanashram, going around the hill, and just being there for some time, maybe 3-4 weeks. Yeah. And then Bhagavan changed everything after that. Yogi Ramsarat Kumar changed everything after that.
Would you explain how you mean this?
So I was, at that time, I had been with, I had spent, in my time at Tiruvannamalai, I had spent a year and a half living in a Titi ashram. And so I had developed a very nice, close relationship with Amma, who is the woman who oversees this spiritual teaching at this ashram. And I spent this year and a half that I was there. I was very quiet, just living kind of silently and in a secluded way in the room directly below her room. So I felt very close to her, even though we didn't talk a lot and I wasn't her student. I just felt very drawn to her, and I was very happy to be very close to her physically. And I feel like I benefited a great deal from being close to her for a long period of time. And when I returned, I was spending time every few days with her, having some chai and just having some small conversation. And I had told her, she wanted to know, before she became a sadhu, before she became a spiritual teacher, she was a doctor, a surgeon. And so she was very interested, of course, in my whole course of treatment and what had happened and what my experiences were. So I had shared these, same as I am sharing with you, I had shared with her. She sent me a message one morning. I was living over in this compound, which is over near the Ramana Old Age Home. You know this place?
Yes.
And so there was a devotee, Swami, living at the Yogi Ram Sarat Kumar ashram. Yogi came to him one night and said, I want you to build a feeding hall for the sadhus, someplace where they can regularly get a meal. So he said, I am just a beggar. I don't know what to do. I'm just a Swami. He said, no, you just wait. Don't tell anyone. I'm sending someone to you. So soon he was just sitting, doing his sadhana as usual in Yogi Ram Sarat Kumar ashram. He was living in that vicinity or there, I don't know which. And so a very close friend of his said, what was asking him what something was up, something had changed. He could see something was different in this Swami. So the Swami said, oh, I had this vision, this dream. Yogi came to me and this is what he said. This man says, oh, okay, wait. Picked up his phone, called someone, said, this is the dream the Swami had. Can you help? This man said, yes, I have this piece of land, which is over near the old age home. And I will give it to this man, and he can start his project there. So this Swami was very uncertain about this because he was a Swami. He didn't want this. Oh no, I have to raise money, I have to find people, I have to get blah, blah, blah. His whole mind was just like, Yogi came to him again and said, no, you are to do nothing. So you go and you just sit, you stay on this piece of property. That's all. You don't do anything. I will send everything to you. You are to do nothing. You don't talk to anyone. You don't ask for anything. You don't beg for anything. You don't do anything. You just go and you do your sadhana there on this property. So next day he goes and he sits. Within a matter of 2 months, money poured in. People came. Builders came. They built the building, dug the well. People came to help. People came to cook. Food was donated. They had to build a storeroom. So all of this happened through Yogi's grace. This Swami is still there. So there was a thought by someone that he should have a grand opening of some sort, or a dedication ceremony. So Amma sent me a message. She said, feeding station is opening tomorrow. I am going to bring people from the ashram. So please join us there. Okay. So we all went, 7 in the morning. We went for idlis, and there was 10 or 15 people sitting around coming from Atiti ashram, Amma, myself, and Swamiji. So we are just sitting there. And so she says, Swamiji, would you tell people the story of how this place came to be? So he related this story that I just related to you, with much more detail, of course. And in the middle of this story, at some point, he just stopped and he looked at me. I was sitting over on one far edge and I was just sitting there drinking coffee. And he looked at me and he said, this one has died. And he looked at the rest of the room and he said, he is finished. For him, there is nothing left. And then he just went on with his story. So it was like right in the middle of his story, this inspiration had come. So, of course, this created quite a big, this made a big among the people from Atiti Ashram that were there. So much so that I finally just had to say, I have to go. I had to leave. I said, I don't know what he's talking about. I'm going. leave me alone, I'm going. So I had to leave. But then that evening or the next day, I got another message from Amma, please come to Atiti Ashram. I said, okay. I went to Atiti Ashram. She said, I just want you to go with me tonight. We're going to walk down to Yogi Ramsara Kumar Ashram. Ma Devaki is there, and she's going to, in the evening, she does these talks about Yogi Ramsara Kumar. So I just wanted you to come with me. Well, what I didn't know was that she had talked with Ma Devaki, told her about this experience with this Swami, told her something about what my experience had been with the illness and so on. And as soon as we walked in, then Ma Devaki says, good, come, sit down. And so there's maybe 60 or 70 people there. And she says, now, tonight you talk. So she just pushed me into the pool, so to speak, I had no idea what was happening. I didn't know what to do. So I just surrendered to Bhagavan and said, okay, if this is what you want, I will talk. So this is how it began. And
Very
then
nice.
from there it got big, and Ma Devaki was always doing his, was doing Yogi Ramsara Kumar teachings at night. And so I started to feel like, after maybe 2 or 3 nights, I don't remember, maybe Anandi remembers, she was there. After 2 or 3 nights, I said to Amma that I didn't feel we should go back there anymore at night, because this was Yogi Ram's time and this was Ma Devaki's time with the disciples and the devotees of Yogi Ram Sarat Kumar, and I didn't feel we should go there anymore and take up this time. And I thought what was happening was I was giving myself a way to get out of it, that I would just go away and just go back to my part of the mountain and keep quiet some more. But the next day I got a message from Amma. She said, tonight you come same time, but you come to Atiti Ashram. I've talked with Swamiji. We'll open up the room, the temple room, and you can come and teach there. And I think that night maybe we had another, I don't know, what do you think, Anandi? 40, 50, 60 people, I don't know, something like that. So I couldn't say no again, so I went and I did it, and then Amma said, okay, so now you have to do this every night until you go. So I think I still had 10 days or something left, a week or 10 days, 2 weeks left in my time. So then we did that every night. And then the next year she wanted us to come back, so we came back. And it just got too big for Atiti Ashram, and they said, oh no, we can't do this. It takes up too many people, too much space. We want the quiet. We don't want 100 people coming in here every day. Yeah. So then we had to move out of there to a bigger space. So that's how it all happened. This was just Yogi's play. No, I had nothing to do with it.
And what do you think? What is the main difference between your teacher before your illness, teaching before the illness, and after?
Before the illness, the in some way the understanding of being and consciousness, the recognition of awareness itself, pristine awareness, not just awareness I am in a body, or I am, or I have this mind, I have these thoughts, not just that witnessing quality. That recognition was still conceptual for me, even though I had understood a lot before the illness. Obviously enough so that over the course of many, many years, people were still coming. I was not advertising or anything. So whether it was one person or when I was teaching in Montana, it was 80 or 90 people. So people were still coming. So there was clearly some understanding was there and was resonating for people. But in my experience, this was still an intellect-based understanding, even though I'd had many profound experiences and met many profound teachers, there was still some point of separation in some way. After the illness, this was gone. And there's this direct knowing now. So now I speak only what I know. I don't teach from books. Occasionally I will still open a book and read something if I'm inspired by it. But more and more I cannot do this anymore.
And what do you think it is about the spiritual practice and the grace in this? What's the place of them in this process of yours?
So grace is always there. This I know now. But there is only one purpose for spiritual practice. And this has nothing to do with awakening. Except that what it does, it's like plowing a field or fertilizing the garden. For a very conflicted and chaotic mind, grace has no trouble penetrating through and destroying all of the vasanas. But if one recognizes that one is not in one's own experience perceiving the truth directly or living from that truth, then what sadhana does, what spiritual practice does, is it's like fertilizing the ground for the garden, or it's like plowing the field. So it's bringing the mind, the heart, the whole being, in a way, focusing it toward the recognition, I am that, until grace shatters the illusion that I am not that. So it's a preparing of the ground, in a way. And this is why I'm always saying to people, you are already that, but then I'm also explaining what do you need to do to handle a particular mind state or emotional state or whatever that comes up. So this is the way that we fertilize the ground, that we plow the ground. We make ready through these helpful pointers that help the mind to fall back away from the belief that I am the body, or the belief that I am the mind, or I am these thoughts, or I am these emotions. We keep falling back away from that. This is not because this causes enlightenment or causes awakening or causes a recognition of the self, but rather the self-awakened being is always there, and it's because of these mind states, emotional states, belief I am the body, that we cannot see what is already there. So then we have to have some practice for how do we move these false beliefs aside so that we can see the truth of our own being. This is the function of sadhana.
Have there been any women teachers who inspired you or brought some values in your journey to realization? If yes, who are they, and what are these values?
Okay. So yes, the answer to that is yes, of course. I've already told you about Dhamma at Atiti Ashram. But my association with women teachers goes back almost to the beginning of my decision, in some way, that I was going to spend my life studying and learning. So I'll try to be relatively quick, but it might take a minute. When I was very young, maybe 15, maybe even younger, 14, something like that. My mother gave me a copy of Siddhartha, and I was deeply impacted by this book. So I think the first one to point me in this direction was my mother. We didn't have a deeply spiritual relationship, but throughout her life she was also a seeker of sorts, and tried different things and spoke with different people, although we didn't speak about it very much. I had left home after that at just 17 or 18, so that relationship didn't continue. But that book had a profound impact on me, and that was especially true because it was not long after that, maybe a year later, that I was working on some research in a library at the school that I went to. And tucked in between a bunch of other books on a shelf was this small book that was titled Ahimsa. So this was Gandhi's teaching on nonviolence. So by the time I was 15, 16 years old, these things were already coming to me and having a deep impact on me, and an interest in Buddhism and yoga and so on arose very young. And so I started searching. And so at one point I realized I wanted to follow the Buddhist path for some time, because I couldn't find anything related to Sri Ramana in America in terms of his teaching, just his image and this one person. But I wanted to go into this monastery just as a part-time student to be able to learn to meditate properly. In the Theravadan tradition, this was with Tangpulu Sayadaw, who was a Burmese master and had established a monastery in California. I was living nearby. So I had to go through an interview with his, one of his primary devotees, who was a woman who had been with him for many, many years, and she became the founding person of the California Institute of Integral Studies. So I had a profound interview with her, and she gave permission for me to join the monks there on the weekends to be able to practice and to learn the proper form of satipatthana, mindfulness of breathing. So this was another, women have directed me. There was the woman in Taos who said, "The time is now, you must come." My first Western Buddhist teacher was a woman named Mary Orr. I studied with her for probably 2 years, 3 years, going to her retreats. I became her retreat manager, so I was traveling with her and doing the support work for her retreats. So she was a teacher. I don't know if she's still teaching. I don't think so. She's a teacher at Spirit Rock in Barre, Massachusetts, with Jack Cornfield and in that lineage. Then when I came to India, like I said, I met Amma. But I also met another woman who I also call Amma. I don't know these women's names. They're always, to me, they are just mother, so they are just Amma. She lives still around the far side of the mountain over near Adi Anamalai. She lives inside a compound there. At the time that she lives with her attendant there. At the time that I met her on the side of the road by walking up to a small cottage that was across from her compound. And I later found out she owned this cottage because I was looking for some place to live. I was coming out of a TT ashram, and I didn't want to live in the Ramana area anymore. I felt like I needed someplace more quiet. So I was looking out there, and I saw this cottage, and I went up to it. It looked like it was empty. I went up to it, and I was looking in the windows and looking around, and I looked around the corner, and here was this woman sitting at the backside of this cottage with her eyes closed, very deep in meditation. And I just felt called to go and to sit there with her for some time, not looking for anything. I just went and sat with her for some time. It was a very profound meeting for me. And I stood up, and I was just starting to leave, and she said, "What is it you're looking for?" She opened her eyes. She hadn't said anything to me before that. I didn't think she even knew I was there. "What is it you're looking for?" Well, I said, "Well, I'm leaving my ashram, a TT ashram. I'm looking for someplace out in the country where I can live for some period of time." And she said, "Come, sit here with me for another minute." So we sat, we talked maybe, and we ended up talking for some time, 15 minutes, half an hour or something, just having some lovely conversation. And then I said, so it's time for me to go. I want to go look and see if I can find a house to rent. And she reached up and she hit the wall on the house. She was leaning against the wall. She hit the wall. She said, "This is for you." So I moved in there. And I spent, I don't know, maybe a year and a half or so with her every day. She is a great, great pujari. She's the only woman I ever met who has been granted permission by the main temple, by the big temple, to do puja in the temple. And she has a Shiva temple and a Ganapati temple inside her compound. And with her attendant every day, she does puja. She does full ceremony. She chants Vedas, does all full offerings at both temples. And so I was able from time to time to go and participate, be there with her, watch her do this. Was a very profound experience for me. And I wanted other people to know that she was there after a period of time. So after about 6 months or a year, I said, "Would you be willing to come?" Oh, I didn't say. At this point, this was maybe 2009 or 2010. She had been in seclusion for 12 years at that point with just her attendant and a couple of people who worked around her property, taking care of the gardens and the stuff like that. But basically she was in seclusion. And so she said, "Yes, okay, I will come out." And we had a palm roof put on the top of the building outside where I was living so that she could come and sit there. And she gave me permission to start to invite a few people to come and be with her. So we did that for about 6 months or 8 months or something like that, where she would come out and she would sit with people or sit in the garden with people and so on. But after some period of time, she realized that, being this kind of a guru kind of figure, this just wasn't for her. So she went back in and we stopped. Yeah. And I stayed there some more months after that, but eventually I ended up leaving there too, because her mother and father were from Chennai, and he was retired. Her father was retired professor, and he had some health problems. So that she didn't have to keep, her and her attendant didn't have to keep going back and forth to Chennai to handle things for her parents. She wanted to move them into this cottage, which was the reason she had built it. But they weren't ready to come at the time I met her, so she offered it to me. So, and of course, I've also had a very close relationship with Anandamoyi Ma in terms of feeling very much that open-hearted relationship that I have with Bhagavan. I've also experienced to some degree with Anandamoyi Ma, and I visited her samadhi and temples of hers. And yeah, this has also been a very deep and profound relationship. So there have been women guides and teachers and mentors for me throughout my time, and it's been a great benefit for me because of the open-hearted nature of the teaching that embodied female sages teach from a very heart-centered place, and it's also a very different place. It has a very, for me, it has a very different feel than it does for with men teachers. Men teachers tend to be a little bit more firm in some way, or a little bit more direct, although both of those amas that I spent many years in association with around Tiru, they were very soft and very gentle. But if you overstepped in some way, or you did something which was in some way needed to be corrected, they're right there. But then they are also, then once that correction is made, their heart is very wide open again. So this taught me a lot. Mostly about in the way that I work with people is to remain free of judgment, but very clear about what it takes for the self to be realized in some way, for the inquiry to bear fruit. You know, when do you need to be persistent? When do you need to stick to it? When do you need to open the heart? Because sometimes in reading the teachings of masters, you know, one gets the impression that it's always about this pressure, you know, keeping oneself in line, moving very directly, persistently, you know, toward the goal. But female sages tend to be, because of the female nature, I think, they tend to be much more loving and forgiving. And if they see that you have understood what they've said and that you are putting this into practice, then it's as though nothing ever happened. So this has been of great benefit to me.
Thank you, Rishi. May I have one more question?
Yes, I am here for you.
About family life. You said that you had children. You have children.
Yes, beautiful children.
Yeah, can you tell us a bit about your practice, your spiritual life and family life, how they mix, or how you can harmonize them?
The most essential part for a spiritual practitioner who is in family life is to realize that your teachers are standing in front of you. Even they are 4 years old. The hardest thing to remember with children for me is maybe how fragile they are and how much responsibility we have. And I don't mean fragile in terms of their physical nature or whatever, you know, they have bodies like everyone else, so that there's that. But if you really want to know the way in which you impact the people around you, watch the faces of your children when you speak to them. they don't have filters. When you speak to them without respect, with some emotion, with some anger, if you speak to them feeling superior to them, if you watch their faces, you will see them crack when you are not kind, and when you are not guiding them, you are lecturing them. You will see them shut down, and you will see their emotions crack, and you will see their love shut down. So they are the primary teachers for opening the heart, if you happen to have them. They are not necessary. I'm not saying that it's necessary to go through family life. That's not the way for all beings. I'm just saying if that's your part of your sadhana, then maybe the thing to understand most importantly is that, like I'm always saying, end your separation. Everything is sadhana. It makes no difference whether you are a monk on the hill, living silently alone in some big city, having a family. This is your sadhana. You don't need to change anything. But it's like every other part of your sadhana. Witness what is happening. Notice the effect of the way you speak, the way you think, the things you say, when to be quiet, when to listen. So, all of these things can be found within family life, all of these opportunities, let's say. The same with a partner. You know, a husband, a wife, a partner. Our task as sadhaks is not to decide what is God and what isn't God, what is my practice and what isn't my practice. Our path is to come to see with our heart that everything is the divine. Everyone is God. Everyone is Guru. If we are listening, not talking.
Thank you. These are very nice final words. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time and patience.
Thank you.